So I'm not sure like the format I'm going to do. So as we're going to do this angle, at least for the forward. To Elva. Not every day do I write a book, but every day I'm here to look. And when I'm look, I'm bound to see to anyone who's all. Maybe not this one. To Elva. Not every day do I write a book, but every day I'm here to look. And when I look, I'm bound to see the one who's always close to me. And as I look, I'm pleased to say my love for her grows every day. She works with me through thick or thin. When something fails, we start again. So now, in grateful appreciation, I dedicate with great elation this book of poems to my wife she made and also saved my life. Elva pulled a tractor off and hedgehog off my crushed chest. With the aid of our family car and rushed me to the hospital. I would have died otherwise. Wow. Forward. Brother Dave Gardner, the most humorous comedian of the late 50s, who almost became a second American Will Rogers, often said, "A diamond is nothing but a little piece of coal that stuck with it." Brothers Dave's saying sums up the career to date of Paul E. Paulson, Houston's salvage dealer, poet, philosopher, and layman minister. Add to this self-driven determination, faith, and you have the successful story of a businessman from the Harrisburg district who is today, way back then, a port of refuge and a humanitarian to ex-cons, human derelicts, talented failures, and the needy. Where established welfare channels often fail, Paul E. Paulson has stepped in to offer a helping hand and a generous amount of his brand of Christianity and day-by-day philosophy that sees him carefully penning letters to convicts, making plans to help convicts get parole, helping them afterwards find employment, friends, and food, and demonstrating by example that love is a practical commodity. He has a particular reason for ministering to convicts. He was himself confined for nearly 2 years in the Wisconsin State Reformatory in his youth. He remembers well the loneliness and despair men endured behind bars. That's why he singles out convicts in particular as the most forgotten beings in need of society's love, faith, and charity. Paul did in fact write some of his earliest poetry while behind bars at reform school, and he's continued to write poetry since. Ream after ream of inspired verse visually shared with a minister, a bereaved family, some human derelict. This dude loves that word, derelict. Or a congregation when he's teaching a Sunday school class or speaking as a lay minister. He has passed around copies for years among family and friends. All who know him request copies of his poems. His grandchildren echo the request of the adults for his poetry. Grandfather, how about Jack in the Box or the Honeybee? Gifted with total recall, Paul E. Paulson can recite his poems at will. The children sometimes help him make up new poems. Several samples are included in this anthology, but the message is the medium, and he will frequently build a sermon around one of his poems. He always sends copies of his poems along with his prolific correspondence to convicts who he is trying to help. They embody his message of faith, love, and hope, and always the very much down-to-earth, humanist, fundamental doctrine of God is love. To Paul E. Paulson, Jesus is living spirit. Jesus is a living spirit, the message of life itself. Somewhat like Alvin Toffler in Life Habits and Outlook, the West Coast long horseman philosopher. They love their nicknames. Paul Paulson lives and deals amongst the working class, conducting his business in land salvage, hardware, and a variety of stores from a small corner hideaway office in the salvage goods outlet at 6402 Harrisburg, Houston, Texas. His files are in cardboard boxes. His office door is open to anyone. If it is manufactured, it can be found in his store. Paul believes that Any bolt lost in the side of the street has value of some sort, just as the souls of the many he has tried to help. Often his results have been laudatory. A dozen or more families in various businesses with Paulson operating as his own small business administration. Perhaps the federal government, SBA itself, would be envious of his success. But he is the first to acknowledge some failures at helping others, both with ex convicts and associates. He then simply turns to prayer. Lord, give me understanding, wisdom, and patience to tolerate when men and women turn down the love you asked me to share. In reviewing hundreds of poems for this anthology, one thing has become clear. Paulson's multi-varied career, as evidenced in the volumes of poems collected from the age 10 to the present, has a theme of sense of destiny and concern for his fellow man. Inherent in all his works, even his earliest poems, evidence. I apologize, guys. Even his earliest poems evidence this concerns with faith, love, and God with man. Paulson's young and physically fit by most age standards, a tall, pure Norwegian, he explains himself. We came across one of his earliest poems, and he genuinely explained that the first poem I ever wrote in 1926, I was 10 years old at the time. I never dreamed I'd be 6 feet tall. My height has changed to conform to this poem in later years. As a tribute to his prophecy, here is the Brother Paulson's first poem. I'm 6 feet 2, a little tall. My feet are big and my body small. Some people with lots of gall laugh and joke and call me Paul. Paulson is my other name. It's not so hot, but just the same. It's not the name that counts at all. It's the name that's in you, Paul. It's a wrestler I'd like to be and not a sailor at sea. And the people may say I'm Maul and call me wrestler instead of Paul. When I am old, say 88, it's the time to pass the gate. I hope to hear St. Peter call, well done, good man. Well done, good and faithful Paul. Paul Paulson, 1926. He was born on April 24th, 1916, in Cecil, Wisconsin, to Norwegian parents Margaret Lee and Ole Paulson. Ole, as in O-L-E. I guess that was a region name. His mother was from Oslo, Norway, and his father from Chicago, but his father, too, was descendant from Norwegian immigrants. Paul was the last of 5 children. Perhaps somewhere in his bloodstream flows the musical cadences of the ancient Norse sagas. His mother and father divorced when Paul was only 2. There followed years of hardships until Margaret Lee married again to Frank Gassel, who moved the entire Paulson brood to his farm near Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada in 1923. His early school books are filled with poems, thoughtful, upbeat, always with insightful into the sufferings of mankind. His early books are filled with poems, thoughtful, upbeat, always with insightful into the sufferings of mankind and man's need for God's love. Before he was out of his teens, he wrote, I wish that I could find a nook in which to lodge and live by acts and deeds and smile on every troubled look. With the hope that kindness breeds, I might like to dodge my fellow man's wants and needs, but I won't try. I will help the guy with all the helps he needs. Paul Paulson. I'm not going to be able to finish the rest of this forward. This forward is gigantic, and so I'm on page 5 of it. Like, that's really bright. Like, y'all can even see that. But as we progress and keep going through this book, hopefully my reading can get better, because the way they're writing back then is very hard for me to pronounce, as some of y'all can see. But this guy, he's just very interesting to me, and I hope he's interesting to y'all too.